All right, everyone. Welcome into the TDA Alabama Football Live podcast, or what I would like to call the TDA After Dark Revival. I am Patrick Dowd, and I'm joined by our scouting and recruiting analyst, Justin Smith. And Justin, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. Technically on a commitment watch in a lot of ways with Pete Gold getting Alabama's defensive coordinator or sending out the elephant emoji, which usually signals the Alabama commitment is going to come a little bit later that day. Just based on what has happened recently, he tweeted it, I think, a couple of weeks ago, the topic of Justin Jefferson and Grayson Hubbard. Usually tweets it when Alabama's about to get a recruit. He is actively recruiting. So we'll see what happens. So we'll see if Ty will land that commitment on here pretty soon. Usually not this big of a gap in between. I think he tweeted it like this morning. After I'm pretty sure Alabama fans have been waiting all day, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the bat signal's been up, but right off the top here, I think everyone's noticed that our own Stephen M. Smith has been off for the past week, and that's because he got married over the weekend, and he's currently on his honeymoon. So, everyone on social media, make sure you send well wishes to the Smith family, and Justin and I will be filling in, obviously in my own words, time slot tonight and also Friday. So be on the lookout for those, but. Like you said, Justin, it's been a pretty busy recruiting cycle for Alabama recently, and especially in the quarterback position where they picked up another four-star quarterback, Dlinemen, out of Georgia. So, it's just what does this guy bring to the table for Alabama in the future?
And there's a lot, so much to like. First off, very strong arm, has a baseball background, one of those type of quarterbacks. Pitcher, of course, he's playing baseball, can throw a 90 miles per hour fastball. So there are some whispers that maybe he probably won't enroll at the University of Alabama. Maybe he'll go into Major League Baseball. We never know with the kid this talented, but he does plan to play baseball and football at the University of Alabama. Of course, has some great mobility in my opinion. I think he's a bit underrated. I think he is listed as a pro-style quarterback on most recruiting sites, but I think he could be listed as a dual threat just based on his ability to escape the pocket and make plays down the field in terms of continuing to accelerate up the field. I think he has decent speed, can create some separation, good size, 6'2", approximately 200 pounds. Can make all of the throws, in my opinion. You know that when Alabama brings in a guy, they usually can make all the throws. But young guys, all about consistency. You got to consistently do it. If you're a quarterback that's going to go to play Power 5, D1 football, everyone knows you probably can make all of the throws, but you have to do it on a consistent basis. And you take a look at his stats and just talking with this offensive coordinator, PJ Cates at Brookwood High School, they talked about how consistent he is. Only threw 3 interceptions this past season. I think he only threw a few as a sophomore as well. So he has consistently taken care of the football as well. So this is a good pickup for the Todd. Him joining that class, joining Eli Holstein as a second quarterback commit. That is something that they have discussed and pushed for in this 2023 recruiting class, possibly adding another quarterback. Of course, Arch Manning was one of their top targets, and Dylan Lonigan was one as well. So the Tide were able to beat off Stanford in South Carolina to get his commitment. I'm pretty sure they've been recruiting him for so long, so I'm pretty sure he was totally brought in, because you have to be totally brought in to come in with a guy at your position, specifically at the quarterback position. A lot of those guys would rather probably come in by themselves.
Yeah, and Alabama's really made an emphasis on the quarterback position this recruiting cycle because I think it's the first, not the first, but I think they did it again in 2019 when they had 2 quarterbacks in the same class. I believe it was Paul Tyson, Talia Tagovailoa. But I think it's important to note because Alabama I think it's the worst kept secret in college football that Bryce Young's going to go to the NFL next year. I think everyone's expecting that. I think it's going to be very important for Alabama to really nail that position with Bryce Young leaving to the NFL, because I think everyone noticed last year, Bryce covered up for a lot of Alabama's deficiencies offensively, whether it was escaping the pocket, keeping plays alive, or just threading the needle with his arm. So whether it's Jalen Milroe, I think that's somebody who everyone's kind of expecting to slide right in, a bit of the elder statesman. But whether he gets hurt or if he's not the guy, Alabama's got to make sure they have multiple options that they really like, and I think they might have that in Holstein and Lonergan here.
Yeah, I think these are 2 good quarterbacks. Any recruiting sites you take a look at, I'm pretty sure both of these quarterbacks are ranked among the top 10 quarterbacks in this 2023 recruiting class. I know a lot of Alabama fans may ask, who is better? I know that question is probably going to come up, and when you look at most of these rankings, they're pretty close. I would give Dylan Lonergan an edge if I had to make a guess. If I had to basically talk about it, I would give Dylan Lonergan the edge.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So, with that being said, Alabama, got two more commits to quarterback. I think they, like you said, the bat signal's been out with Pete Golding tweeting out the elephant emoji. I think that makes now 11 commits in this class. I know Alabama's still waiting on a few guys to see where they go, but the popular question this season, and I think that's everyone's got put on everyone's radar, is Nick Saban out of touch, especially in recruiting, because the Peter Woods comments went pretty viral this over the weekend when he committed to Clemson and basically said that Dabo Swinney, I'm paraphrasing here, but he has a better understanding of the 18-year-old lifestyle, and he's a bit more in touch with the times as opposed to somebody like Nick Saban, which sent the fan base into a frenzy. So I figured there's no better place to pose the question than here. Is Nick Saban out of touch?
No, I don't think Nick Saban is out of touch. I know
Yeah,
Steven
no way.
got a lot of pushback from it. I know that's was really interesting. When you take a look at Twitter, when he just basically posed the question because of what Peter Woods said, and I think a lot of Alabama fans looked at it as Peter Woods was saying that was the reason he committed to Clemson over Alabama. But the question was posed to him. Reporters always trying to get a talking point, some to discuss, get views on their sites. Of course, that is what reporters do. That is part of our job. But the question that was posed to Peter Woods, of course, was what is the difference between Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney? And I think even without me knowing any one of them personally, that is the answer that I probably would come up with. I would say Dabo Swinney is a bit more livelier than Alabama, and not Alabama, but Nick Saban in terms of him celebrating with his team after wins and the way just his personality and how he comes out when you see him in interviews. So I think that was a pretty expected answer, but I think just with the situation with him being 5-star defensive end out of Thompson High School, Alabama, out of Alabama's backyard, a school who has constantly produced top talent, and Alabama has went into Thompson and poured in a lot of that top talent. So I think all of that mixed together with his comments. I think I think people need to understand. I think a lot of times we talk about these kids a lot of times, and they almost come off as mini celebrities in a lot of ways, but these are still kids. If you go back to that interview, a lot of cameras in your face, just committed. Pretty sure a lot of weight was lifted off of his shoulder in terms of him making that announcement. But I wouldn't put too much stake in him saying that Dabo Swinney is exactly who you think he is when you watch his interviews and when you compare him to Alabama.
Yeah, and look, the 18-year-old kid had nice things to say about the school that he committed to. We're not, we shouldn't be, people shouldn't be losing their minds over this. And but how much younger is Dabo Swinney than Nick Saban? I would hope that he has a better idea of the 2022 18-year-old lifestyle than Nick Saban does. But I don't think that doesn't mean that, like you said, Nick Saban is a bad recruit. Has lost his touch in terms of recruiting, because I think this even though that this class isn't necessarily historic, I think it's still a pretty good class as it stands. And I think it's also a bit of the standards game in Alabama. I know a lot of people can get caught up with whether it's stars next to players' names or just where certain teams are ranked in the summer of recruiting. And I think the standard that Alabama set, because they had some of the highest rated recruiting classes they've ever had the last couple of years. And I think the landscape with NIL and everything like that has completely changed things. And I think even though this is still a solid class, I think even Alabama has earned the right to have a bit of an adjustment curve, even if that means they're going to have like the 9th best recruiting class or the 8th best recruiting class. Some things like that don't necessarily matter. And I think it's also important to note that stars aren't created equal. A 5-star from the North necessarily isn't the same player as a 4-star from the South, and so on. I believe, just look at the guys that Alabama has brought in the past, like the Jonathan Allens of the world in the defensive line. I think he was a 3-star recruit when he came in. Mac Jones wasn't a highly recruited player. There's a lot of guys who have come in. Josh Jacobs, another guy that comes to mind. There's a lot of guys who were sort of under recruited or underranked that have turned into NFL players who play a lot at the next level. So I think, like you said, it's just something that fans just can't get too caught up into. And I think Alabama's just going to be just fine moving into the future. Like I said, this is still a solid recruiting class. There's no reason to freak out. I think Alabama isn't going anywhere for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, for sure. This class could easily take the #1 spot on once everything is over with. There's still a long way to go. We're arguably at the halfway point. There's so much time to go. So many different prospects can still start to emerge. Something I was just thinking about recently, just going back to the 2022 recruiting class, you had a guy like Isaiah Hastings who had a big senior season, and the Crimson Tide knew about him, of course, before that senior season, but he started to make noise at Clearwater Academy in Florida on his senior season. Then he got on Alabama's radar, and the Crimson Tide started to recruit him. So there's still a long way to go. Some new guys could start to emerge like that, and Alabama definitely has several key flip targets, and Peter Woods will be most definitely one of their flip targets moving forward. Alabama has developed a great relationship with him. I'm pretty sure they're going to try everything in their power to try to flip him. They have an in-house recruiter in terms of his teammate, Tony Mitchell, being verbally committed to them at the moment. They also have Jeremiah Alexander and Traquan Fagans, who will be freshmen at the University of Alabama this upcoming season, but I'm pretty sure they will be in Peter Woods' ear as well. So that recruiting battle is far from over, but he is firmly committed to the Clemson Tigers at the moment. But like I said at the beginning of the show, we are still on commitment watch, waiting to see which prospect will commit to Alabama next, as not Peter Woods, but Pete Golding, Alabama's defensive coordinator, tweeted out the elephant emoji earlier, which usually points to the Crimson Tide possibly picking up a commitment from a recruit. He is actively recruiting some guys across Mississippi and Louisiana who he's recruiting like 5-star wide receiver Shelton Sampson. He's been put into that conversation. 4-star athlete Centarian Perkins, who's verbally committed to Ole Miss. He's also worthy of getting worthy of being put into that conversation. You have Edric Hill, a defensive lineman, a 4-star in 2023 recruiting class, who we could be to watch out here for. So we will see what happens in terms of Pete Golding tweeting out that elephant emoji to see which recruit will commit to Alabama next. But like you said earlier, and I'm pretty sure a lot of Alabama fans are saying too, there's still a long way to go. We're in July.
Yep, like you said, it's the halfway point in this recruiting cycle and pretty much the halfway point of the show right now. So everyone keep hitting that like button, subscribe to the channel. I just noticed now a question from Elijah Petaway. Is Stephen Smith coming on today? Nope, Stephen is off for the entire week. He is on his honeymoon, but stay right here. We're still giving you some good Alabama football content all week long until Stephen comes back for SEC Media Days next week. And him and I will be in attendance for that event and give you all the latest that comes out of there in terms of Alabama coverage. And as we transition here to our third topic, it was brought up by Senior Bowl director Jim Nagy, where he discussed Alabama's 3 senior defensive linemen and how those good folks over the Senior Bowl have seen that the 3 of them have actually risen up the charts in terms of their grades, their preseason grades, where they have their own system where they scout out their own talent to invite to the Senior Bowl. And they noticed that Alabama's 3 defensive linemen continue to move up in that regard, that being Justin Eboigbe, G.J. Dale, and Byron Young. And that kind of got me thinking, what are the expectations for this defensive line this year? Because Alabama's lost some depth in that regard, but with 2 guys, their best defensive lineman, Fedarian Mathis, and a good rotational piece, LeBron Ray, very experienced players who've gone on to the NFL. And I think that it's another talking point for Alabama fans where they haven't necessarily been pleased with the amount of dominance from the defensive line up front, even though they still have guys like Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, and I think Chris Braswell will be someone else in the linebacker position to look out for in terms of the pass rush. But in terms of the 3 guys, Eboigbe, Dale, and Young, just what are the expectations that we should put on them moving into 2022?
I think the expectations are pretty high on his defensive group as a whole, starting with the defensive coordinator Pete Golding. I think this is the year where a lot of people may say he doesn't have any excuses. You have an experienced linebacker core. Take a look at Henry To'oTo'o. You have Taylor Moody, experienced secondary, experienced defensive line. When we talk about those 3 guys and experience rushing off the edge, when you take a look at Will Anderson, who's arguably the best, could say the best player in college football, but definitely the best defensive player in college football. You also have Dallas Turner, who is a rising star who's expected to take another step after having a big freshman season for the Crimson Tide. So I think the expectations are pretty high for the defense group as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it really starts with the defensive front when we talk about guys like Henry Toto and whoever fills in that linebacker position, whether it's Jalen Moody or Deontay Lawson. So much rides in the run defense on the guys up front. And I think Dale is somebody who's brings obviously a lot of experience, a 4-year starter now. Boygby's been a rotational player, and honestly, the guy I'm really most excited about is Byron Young moving into this season because he's a guy who shows some flashes like Fedarian Mathis in terms of the same amount of energy and just his ability to stop the run and kind of get after the passer a little bit. I just think Alabama needs to find a way with their defensive line coach Freddie Roach, to get him just a bit more consistent. I think he's going to do that with his extended playing time this season because all these guys, like Alabama was 5, 6, 7 players deep at the defensive line. They had a lot of rotations, and now all of a sudden, it's these three guys who have a lot of playing experience, and then a couple unproven guys behind them. So I think that this group right here is going to be really relied upon going into the season. But my eye is going to be on Byron Young.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing about Byron Young. You go back and watch Alabama's games from last season. Just take a look. Some of those old games, I'm pretty sure you can pull them up on YouTube. But yeah, Byron Young definitely flashed. I think Justin and Boyd did not flash as much this past season, but in other seasons he did. So we'll see what happens with them. Both of those guys are massive defensive linemen who have the potential to be really good. And I think if they take the next step, I think that can be the difference in Alabama's defense this upcoming season. Like I said, that is probably the biggest question mark on the defense side of football because, like I said, secondary you have so much depth there. Jordan Battle, Malachi Moore, Brian Branch, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Kyrie Jackson, so much depth in the secondary depth at the linebacker position, but you have those two leaders in terms of Henry Toto and Jalen Moody leading the way. But along the defensive front, I think you have some question marks. Seen Justin Boyd and Byron Young flash, so we'll see what happens with them. In terms of DJ Dale, I know a lot of Alabama fans are not too high on Dale, but the Crimson Tide's coaching staff seems to have a lot of confidence in him, or they don't feel as confident in the guys behind them because he's basically been a starter ever since he stepped on campus at the defensive tackle position. So we will see what happens with Dale, but the expectation is that he will most likely start. If I had to make a guess right now, just based on the history and how he is always on the way to be the starter. But outside of those guys who you listed, the three guys, the seniors who are expected to have big seasons and possibly take big steps to improve their draft stocks in the future. You have those guys who are just fighting to get on the field. You have Jamil Burrows, Tim Smith, who will most definitely be in the rotation. He has consistently been in the rotation. Could one of those guys step up and just possibly push one of those guys out the way? When you take a look at Jamil Burrows, Tim Smith, you also have Jamirian Latham. Could one of those guys, Damon Payne, who's a five-star defensive lineman coming out of high school, can either one of those guys possibly step up and make a name for themselves? I think that's something we have to keep our eyes on as well. But the defensive line group, if it steps up, it could be the difference in this defense being good and great.
Yeah, in terms of biggest question marks, I think it speaks a lot to Alabama's defense this year that the biggest question marks revolve around a defensive line that has three seniors who are probably all going to start and have played in the past. But with the guys behind them that you mentioned, I mean, one or two of them is going to have to step up and push somebody because they need, like, even though that they have three seniors that are likely to start, they need to create some sort of depth there, or whether guys get injured all the time in the SEC, or there's lack of production somewhere. They need guys that they can rotate in the game and guys that they can play because Alabama is. I've pretty much always said this. Alabama's defense is at its best when they have a big, large rotation of guys in the defensive line. You look back to any of their great defenses, whether it's 2015 or any that you can pick any year they won the national championship. I can tell you that they had a really, really good defensive line up front to help clear up the pass for the linebackers. And I think though the key that Alabama needs to figure out on the defensive line is where that pass rush is going to come. I know everyone's a little bit low on DJ Dale. I'll come to his defense. I think he's solid. There's a reason why he started for 4 years, but he's not necessarily the greatest pass rusher in the world. So I think that Byron Young and Boyd kind of need to step up in that regard to add some pressure on the quarterback. And whether it's Tim Smith or I think it was Jamil Burroughs in Alabama spring game that had multiple sacks. I'm sure the chat will correct me on that. But there's guys that have shown flashes. Some of the young guys have shown flashes, or whether it is a former top recruit like Damon Payne to come in and try to push some of these guys or create some sort of pass rush or any sort of contributions will be welcomed by this defensive front.
Yeah, most definitely. And if I had to think of a younger guy who could possibly come in and make some type of impact, there's a long defensive front. Keep your eyes on Jeremiah Alexander coming from the edge. But as an interior guy, my eyes go to a guy who was easily one of the more physical high school prospects I've ever seen in person. Just has this physical mean streak. You take a look at Curtis Perry. He's a bit undersized, maybe. So if he continues to pack on some weight to get up to a good size for the season, maybe in terms of a younger guy, but I think he has a lot of competition ahead of him when you take a look at those seniors. But thank you guys so much for the super chats. Gucci Todd, William Morris. Thank you guys so much for donating to the channel. We are definitely still accepting super chats like we typically would do on Steven's show. We have Steven actually in the chat. Said he's shopping now. Had to support me and Pat. But yeah, shout out to Stephen M. Smith once again. Congratulations on him getting married. I know that's a huge moment for him. I know that in the comments we'll also answer some of you guys' questions at the end. But I see a comment here pointing at Jaheim Otis as well as a younger guy who has consistently made a transition. Was a massive defensive lineman. According to press release that Alabama released when they signed the 2022 recruiting class, came in weighing more than 340 pounds. So he has consistently dropped some weight and looks really good. So maybe Otis, I think he's a guy who has impressed at times during the spring. So maybe a young guy to keep our eyes on in terms of the defensive front.
And I'll say this about Otis. He took one of the most intimidating pictures I've ever seen at an Alabama spring game during warmups. The guy's, the guy, good. Good on that guy. He's lost a ton of weight since he's arrived at Alabama. I think he still has some goals to reach there. But, he's a big guy who has a chance to contribute here in the future if he can get things going. And I think we can probably go ahead and take some questions here from the chat.
Yeah, you guys be sure to drop some questions into the chat. We will be answering the questions. It could be pertaining to anything surrounding Alabama football, recruiting news, the roster, and we'll definitely see. We can answer those for you. We're definitely open to answering anything. So be sure to just post a question to the chat. Donate if you want to into the super chat. We definitely love that you guys are supporting to the channel.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think we have one here from Popeye Dave. Malik Bryant, Miami or Bama got the best shot. Malik. So
yeah, I think Miami is definitely trending upwards. Just taking a look at their recruitment of him as a whole and just their recruiting in general. They are on fire on the recruiting trail, picking up commitment after commitment. They picked up commitments from Jaden Wayne and Raul Aguirre recently. Both were Alabama targets. So I think Miami is definitely in a good position with Brian at the moment. I think the tide is still in the race. I'm leaning more towards Miami at the moment. So we'll see what happens with Malik Bryant. The tide, we're in a very solid position at one point in time, but we'll see what happens. But Miami is definitely tearing it up on the recruiting trail. Mario Cristobal is getting it done down in South Florida. And then we just take a look at what all that program has to offer in terms of things even outside of football, the weather, the campus. They have a lot of things working in their favor, but I still feel the Tide is in a good position with a lot of guys at the moment. But I lean more towards Miami than taking a look at Malik Bryant at this point in time.
Yeah, I remember getting sent down to the national championship in Miami in 2020, and you guys almost didn't get me back. So I can understand that there is a draw to want to go play football in the state of Florida. But we have another question here from William Morris. Do you guys think that Tim Smith ever really stepped up? I, for one, do not. And no, I don't think he has yet, but he's a guy who's been kind of buried behind a lot of experience in the defensive line. So I think this is his opportunity this fall to really step up and kind of make a name for himself. Alabama's going to need, like I said, and like we both touched on, Alabama's going to need somebody on that defensive line to step up and join that rotation. And he's a guy who's been in the program a few years now, and he has shown some flashes of being a good pass rusher up the middle, which is something Alabama's going to need. So I think this fall will be his best opportunity to step up on the defensive line. So as we move on here, we have a $2 donation, another $2 donation from Gucci Ty. We appreciate it. Question for Justin: what current commit is most underrated for Alabama?
That's an interesting question right now. I wonder who I'll go with. I kind of want to lean towards Grayson Hubbard, but I feel there are a lot of questions about his game because he only plays quarterback at the moment at his current high school. I really am intrigued in seeing what position he will play this upcoming season. We know he will play quarterback at Ocean Springs High School, but with the Crimson Tide looking at possibly using him as safety, I wonder will his high school coach use him there as well, and we'll see if he's actually underrated. So he may be the most underrated, but we have to see what he looks like in terms of a defensive back, at least in my opinion, get an opportunity to see him in person so I can give you guys videos and a report in a detailed evaluation from what I see in terms of the position he would possibly play at Alabama. But outside of him, I'll probably go to Cole Adams. Some people have him listed as a 3-star, but I think he's at least a 4-star. He's a 4-star on our site for sure, touchdown, Alabama.com, and our own independent recruiting ranking. So I would go to Cole Adams, speedy wide receiver, a guy who's not afraid to take on contact. He's physical when blocking down the field. When you have a wide receiver who is willing to block, that could be the difference between a 5 to 10 yard gain and a 20-yard gains. He has some experience playing on the defensive side of football as well, and I think that points to his physicality. So you love to see a guy who, at a school where he is playing at, does not look like he has to play there. I know at a lot of smaller schools, you probably have to play on defensive side of football, play Ironman football, play on both sides, but he's not a guy who has to do that. So when he has the opportunity to do that, you know that he probably is one of the best athletes on his particular high school football team.
All right, and I think we'll take a few more here. We got one here from Willie351. Who do y'all think will step up on defense besides the regular people? I would say Alabama's third outside linebacker, Chris Braswell, because he's somebody who's gained a lot of momentum. He got a lot of compliments from Nick Saban in the spring, and he made a note that he's a guy along with Dallas Turner and Will Anderson. He wants to get all three of those guys on the field this fall. And he's somebody who's made a big impact in the spring and looked at possibly getting playing time last year with Christopher Allen going down along with Drew Sanders, the second string. But Dallas Turner ultimately stepped up, but Alabama's obviously still very high on Chris Braswell. Justin, do you have somebody in mind?
I was going to think about possibly talking about a wide receiver, but I think that wide receiver room is so talented and so deep. You basically can throw all their names in a hat and just pull out your first 3 guys and see who gets onto the field. But in terms of somebody possibly outside of the names that you usually hear, maybe at the inside linebacker position, a guy like Deontay Lawson, one of those guys behind Henry To'oTo'o and Jalen Moody, in case possibly go down, have to sit down for a game or something. I think those are the guys you probably need to pay attention to as well. Who will step up at the inside linebacker position if one of those guys happen to go down? I think Deontay Lawson will be a guy I would look forward to possibly seeing on the field this upcoming season. Was really good in high school. He's just one of those guys when you watch his film, he just looks like a linebacker. He has that natural feel, flows around the football really well. Great speed, great size. Has consistently continued to improve. I think he was starting his first spring game a couple of years ago with the Crimson Tide's first team offense. So Alabama seems to be really confident in how he has developed so far. So it'll be interesting to see if he can possibly make some break into the rotation.
All right, and I think we'll take one more here from none other than Nick Saban Jr. How do you feel about Kyrie Jackson? How will he impact the defense? I think Kyrie Jackson is obviously somebody who had to play a lot last season at the end of the year, got some good experience in the college football playoff. I believe he was a starter in the spring game. I think he's going to be a key contributor in that secondary to help bring some of the younger players along or just to buy time before. I know Eli Ricks is a very highly touted transfer over from LSU. But I think having someone like Kyrie Jackson, even if he's the second starter along Kool-Aid and McKinstry, or if he's the third corner, I think he's a very good experienced option for Alabama in the secondary.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I know that I think his trainer came on to Steven's show like a couple of weeks back and talked about how he was still getting adjusted to the playbook last season. So it looks as if he has a better grasp on the playbook as a whole now. So maybe that will impact his game. So I think he will definitely be probably a bit better this upcoming season. But he has all of the traits that you like to see out of a cornerback in today's game. Long, lengthy, athletic guy who made some plays the last season, but I think a lot of Alabama fans were a bit down on him in terms of the way he finished the season. But he has opportunity to redeem himself this upcoming season. But it all depends on where I guess, sits in the depth chart. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry maybe the closest guy who you can put in as a most likely starter at this point, but you never know because Eli Ricks is a highly touted transfer, like you said, and Kyrie Jackson is a pretty good corner as well. So we will see how the Tide plays all those guys out there.
Yeah, a lot of questions still to be had across the roster. As we get closer and closer to fall camp, those will be answered. But I think that's going to do it here tonight from us. We appreciate you guys joining us here tonight. Once again, make sure you all show love to Steven on his honeymoon. We appreciate your guys' super chats. Justin and I will be back on here Friday around the same time to be chatting more Alabama football with you guys. As always, everyone take care. Have a great one. We appreciate it.